This is getting even.
Christmas gifts.
A second portion of the committee that I wanted to hone in on, outside of the rather humorous 4-minute men, is the Red Cross, because it really is within Red Cross activities that the majority of Gettysburgians, civilians, and countians at large could participate. All of these functions, like the larger committee and its subsections, each one of these functions had a chairperson who was in charge of jam, jelly, and flowers. And I said, what the hell are you talking about? They made jams and jellies to be shipped over to the troops.
Okay, and there was no
I don't know what
governance, like how we have the Food and Drug and all these, they could
No.
just send all these goodies. How
No.
cool is that?
That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
They're the care packages that I used to work on for guys over in Iraq, or we'd send pralines and pumpkin bread and stuff like that over. Campaign to enroll nurses is not necessarily a recruiting for military nurses. It's to enroll nurses in the community to serve as assistants for community aid. We had a situation here where the community population, at least Gettysburg, more than tripled with the camp. And there was a dire need for care to be given. Christmas gifts, you can figure that one out. It's for the troops. The canteen department, they kept supplies on hand for the soldiers at the camp. The specific 3 that I've highlighted, I would like to talk about in a little bit of detail, but not without mentioning the lady who kind of ran the Red Cross for a while early on here in the community, was sort of the grand dame of Gettysburg, probably the best educated woman in the community. This is Mrs. Elsie Singmaster Lewis. I could not find a picture that I can pinpoint as World War I era. This is obviously, I think, in the 40s from the style of her clothing, her shoulders and all. All I could find were the 18-year-old and the older woman. I went with the older woman. I love that poster, and if anybody can find an original of it, I'd be willing to go a couple $100 for it. Here in the local area, they opened the reading and game rooms at the college chapel and in the basement of what's now the Adams County National Bank up on the square. These were for primarily the guys from the camp. The library was kept stocked with books, current magazines, and writing materials. So if they wanted a place of quiet for a while, away from the hubbub of the barracks, that's where they could go for some respite and write a letter home to mom. Chapters in Harrisburg, Carlisle, and York provided a lot of materials for the reading rooms because this was a small community and they did not have a lot of dollars to commit to a major library type situation. The poster was from the American Library Association, which actively solicited donated books, and they also purchased books to ship overseas. all the local efforts in this regard stayed in the community because of the camp being here. These are my girls. This be the knitting department. If any of you have ever seen my Facebook stuff, I'm an avid fiber artist, as are some of my friends here.
You mean the Tuesday night stitch and bitch?
Yeah.
Tuesday night stitch and bitch group.
Oh, dear. I should go just watch that.
Nice, Chuck.
At the outset of 1917, the U.S. Army had 120,000 men. By the end of the war, over 1.5 million were in uniform. And of those, a significant number were deployed in theater. And they needed stuff that our industrial base simply could not provide. So the call was sent out to the Red Cross administer the program. They provided yarn and patterns. And standing up here on the side is an example. Now this is a repro. They are now selling kits at the outset of the centennial to make hats, scarves, sweaters, and wristlets.
It is done on the original pattern.
It is the original pattern with the original weight and the original color and type of yarn. The wool now is a
And
whole
you
lot
can do-
smoother than it was back then now.
Come around from the camera.
Yes, model that.
That's one reason why it's so long, because it gets awfully cold if you're outside
Yeah.
in
Oh, that is really nice.
regular clothes all winter long.
You make it.
But you can see it's
That's the one.
close to 8 feet long.
Did you knit that, Louise?
Yes, I did.
I
Oh,
thought,
yeah.
Very nice.
Nice.
That was actually the very first thing she knitted.
And you actually found the yarn the right color, or did you have to dye the yarn?
Actually, the National World War I Museum at Liberty Memorial and in Kansas City sells the kits. That's where we got it.
With needles.
Wow.
Yes, my first ever bamboo needles. Through their local chapters, the Red Cross produced these items and shipped them. They were responsible for collecting them. And I'm sure a lot of them look like my first attempts at maneuvering those needles around. This stuff had to be fixed.
You.
And short.
Hi, Tim, come on in. Did you come with me? You're familiar with the term doughboys. At the outset of the war, our guys were called semis. And the Knit for Semi program soon included other things. I know it looks absolutely ridiculous.
a wool helmet.
But a wool helmet, sure. Northern Europe in the off-season is dang cold, dang uncomfortable, and dang wet. And anything to keep the body temperature up was solicited. Oh, the fingerless mitts too. I couldn't find a picture of them, but that made sense because now the fact that the Army had to account for all the Red Cross items that they received probably really made for some unhappy quartermasters in France and Belgium and Italy. But that's the value they placed on these items that were being made by the hearths and firesides of the home front. And for a community this small, almost 3,000, and I like that, almost perfect. Of course, Adams County knitters are going to be perfect, really. They were distributed locally to the Camp Colt guys or shipped off to Philly to be shipped overseas. Now, those are some snippets into what's going on here in the community. This could not have been a very pleasant experience, particularly for the families who had sons and daughters deployed. And the nurses were, to be perfectly honest, in just as much danger as were the soldiers, particularly after the influenza pandemic broke out in 18. And this community did not have, as many of you probably know at that time, did not have a hospital. We do now. And it was a result of the pandemic and the World War I experience that we have it. Annie Werner and her husband made sure that after the war, we got a hospital built. She was one of the volunteer nurses recruited for service here in the community. She became ill with the influenza, but I think she survived. She did survive.
Her husband said it would be a memorial hospital or in either in memory or in honor of her. She lived, so this hospital was named.
And I've never quite gotten over the name Annie Werner Hospital being taken away from our local medical facility.
Yeah.
After the guns fell silent in November of 1918, after the Kaiser's armies surrendered in the train car at Compiègne, and after the troops came home, there were a number of ways that communities commemorated and memorialized the war experience. The American experience is a whole lot different than that which you find over where the fighting actually occurred. The image on your left is one of the most powerful memorials I've ever seen. It is called Les Fantômes, the Phantoms, and it is in north central France near the Somme. And it's a haunting view of the men who went off to war and never came home. Also, that nation, in 1922, the French Parliament passed a law requiring each town in the country to put up a memorial of some sort. And you can see these hundreds and hundreds of memorials driving through little French towns. And some of them are very beautiful, and some of them are absolutely heartbreaking, because every one of them has the roll of the dead from that community inscribed. The American experience is a little bit different. You've all seen him somewhere. Locally, Chambersburg and Emmitsburg. But he's all across, especially the heartland of America. Gettysburg didn't go with the Doughboy statue. Not too sure why. Now, I didn't find anything in print during the period when these things were being put out to explain why they went the other route. If you remember back on the larger committee sections, there was one called the Roll of Honor. There was a person in the community responsible for keeping track of who in the community didn't come home. And we lost of our 1,000 and some troops, 63 didn't come home. Many of you have probably seen this in 1954. There was a reunion of Camp Colt veterans here, and they planted a memorial tree, which harkens back to something I'm going to be talking about in a little bit. The tree and the plaque are just look like part of the landscape to many of us who are local today. But if you've never been to it, it's kind of neat to go out and take a look. It's about, 900 yards south on US or Business 15, the Emmitsburg Road. Roads of Remembrance was a program post-war run by the American Legion. I think it was not really centrally run, other than they put it out there, and a lot of local civic groups took up the call to plant trees in remembrance of the soldiers who didn't return to their families. Now, this isn't Adams County. I have to go to York County to get this monument. It's on US Route 30, east of the village of Abbottstown. It's one of two monuments that were dedicated on Memorial Day, May 30th, 1922. This one on the western terminus, and the other at Wrightsville, down along the Susquehanna River, were dedicated at that stretch of the Lincoln Highway. In between those two markers were the York County's Road of Remembrance. And you can still see remnants of what was planted along that roadway in the form of beech trees. Sycamore trees, sorry, sycamore beech, they don't look like the name. The photo here on the right, my technological expertise could not get it cropped out of this page of American Forestry magazine, but this is the dedication of this particular tablet, that Memorial Day. And the Memorial Trees program actually picked up a lot of steam because First Lady Frances Harding, President Harding's wife, supported it. She actually went out and planted trees in Washington as part of the Roads of Remembrance. Now today here in Gettysburg, near Gettysburg, you can still see some vestiges. Up Route 15 north, there are a lot of sycamore trees planted. And you can then, they're equidistant apart. They're hovering over the road, and a gap's been cut out of them for the phone wires. This is a stand, these are two stands actually, west of Gettysburg on the Knoxland Ridge. I'm kind of standing on the ridge. There on the left, I'm looking west towards Chambersburg, and the right image, I'm looking east back towards the town.
They look like identical images.
Don't they?
Yeah.
It's the best. Damn! You're right, they are. Okay.
Oh, those cows.
I'm looking east both ways. I need to go back to my laptop and fix that, because looking west down towards Marsh Creek. I hate PowerPoint.
You're totally fine. Just go with it.
Probably the most lasting remnant of World War I in Gettysburg is the roundabout. The enormous amount of traffic had this put in 1918. The borough had it put in to regulate the vehicular traffic, and we all know how well that works.
Yeah. People avoid like the plague.
Now, we also have a great many of our cemeteries with World War I veterans. These are this image is from the National Cemetery, where I have a couple of stones in a row that quite probably are Camp Colt casualties. And I'm going to research this lad. James Millage was from Pittsburgh. He was buried shortly after he died near the town of Château-Thierry in France. He was buried over there. The American government gave families the option of having bodies repatriated back to the States and burial. I'm not sure how Millage, not native, he was born in Sicily, grew up in Pittsburgh, ended up in Gettysburg National Cemetery. It's a mystery I'd like to solve before the centenary is over. But I added a second image. Now, I do know that these are two different images. Because I'm going to hail the work that your group, that you all do with the Sergeant Mack Foundation and the memorial flags and wreaths. That's very nice. Here's a close-up of Millage. I remember Albert Lentz. He was actually the first Countian to fall in battle at Cantigny. He was repatriated at the family's request. But what about those who were not repatriated? Remember Chaplain Bell? He's still over there, as are thousands and thousands of others. In 1929, Congress authorized funds to be administered by the Quartermaster's Department of the Army to send mothers and unremarried widows overseas to visit their loved one's stone. Known as the Gold Star Mothers pilgrimages, there were 3 between 1930 and 1933. And even though the Depression had started, this program still continued through those early dark years. I'm missing a slide. Anyway, there is a ledger prepared by, it's a typewritten ledger prepared by the Quartermaster Department of all the mothers eligible to go. That's close up showing Albert Bell. Listed on here is both a widow and a mother. Yeah. Sorry about that. The bottom line is the widow did not go on the pilgrimage. The final production of this in published form, she was not shown. But his mother, Elizabeth Bell, who lived a couple blocks from here over on South Stratton Street, did go to St. Mihiel. I said Romaine earlier, I meant to say St. Mihiel Cemetery, to visit her son's grave. And what would happen at that time? They were provided with a chair, and they were able to sit and reflect on their loved one. They were given a wreath to put on the grave. And photographers accompanied the pilgrimages and took photographs of the mothers at their, or the widows at the graves. What?
The bags of dirt.
I'm getting to the French dirt bags.
Set this up.
No.
Sorry, okay.
There was also something that each mother got as well, but not from our government. The government of France gave each woman a little silk, red, white, and blue striped bag full of soil from France. I've only ever seen one of them. But she got a certificate with it authenticating that that's what it is. I wouldn't have forgotten that. Only one mother out of the 63, I really don't know how many Adams Countyans were repatriated back, but only one mother from this community went on the pilgrimage. The pilgrimages were segregated. There were black veterans buried over there as well, or black soldiers. And some of their mothers and wives were considered eligible, and the quartermaster department sent them stuff. Now, this is just some informal, if anybody's interested. This is a good book. I've read the first chapter. I'm hooked. I don't receive any money for this plug. Forthcoming, not published yet. Him I would take money from. This stands to be a really, really good book of local interest for this group, and I wanted to throw it in there. Online, young lady, as part of her senior project out of Gettysburg College, I think 2 years ago, Sarah did a blog on Gettysburg during World War I. It has got so much more information than I've just skimmed the surface about this community during those years. And the final thing involves not really war, but I promised Tammy I would mention this. There is a GoFundMe site out there trying to raise money for a wayside exhibit for 2 Marines who were killed here at Gettysburg, back behind the building, back in this direction. In 1922, the U.S. Marines did a staff ride, and these were 2 airmen who went down in a plane crash in what would become Colt Park. I don't know.
Very possibly.
There's a lot of stuff I don't know, but if you've got questions, I'm here. Thank you.
Very well. Anybody have any questions for Louise?
Louise, do we know if any of the soldiers who went through Camp Colt actually got to a tank unit in Europe?
Very few did.
Okay.
Very few did. But I don't know how many. Yeah.
Is it true that Eisenhower didn't have any guns?
No, he did not have any guns.
Or on the tanking, he had to drive to DC and get.
Yes.
Yeah, that was like unbelievable.
Yes, that was a very
Yes.
good question about Camp Colt being supplied properly to train the men. The camp commander, Eisenhower, had to go to Washington to get armament to teach his guys how to use the weapons.
That's a typical government.
Yeah.
I know. Thank God I'm retired.
Was Eisenhower a local prior to the war?
No, he was actually born in Texas, but he's most closely associated with Kansas. He grew up in Abilene, Kansas.
With such a high degree of German population in this area, what was the feeling prior to the war, about the war?
That is a really good question. And that's going to be one of the times where I'm going to have to say, I don't know. I read a bunch of newspapers, Gettysburg Times newspapers, and I only had 3 weeks to put this together, so I decided that was going to be one thing I didn't concentrate on. I couldn't find any evidence that there was any sentiment, anti-German or pro-German, in this community. They were just grateful they weren't involved.
Yeah.
Do you know Tom Vossler at all?
Okay.
One of the guys. And his family lived up in New York State, and with that name, he could give you some details
Yeah, he
about the
was
negative
from
side.
Wellsville, New York, out in the western part of New York State. And his family got some crap from their neighbors because of the German heritage. I do know there was a German living here in the community, and I didn't put this in the program because I didn't have his name. He was a German immigrant, a recent German immigrant. He changed his name and enlisted in the Army as an American soldier. And he later became known as Douglas MacArthur's G2, Charlie Willoughby. But I really don't know. I have been helping with the processing and organizing of our church archives. And I paid a lot of attention to the church bulletins from 1914 to 1919. And the church would report on events in their, it was a booklet, a monthly booklet. When the camp came to Gettysburg, they had troops in for social gatherings and dances into our church, but never did I find any the evangelical Lutherans, so they were all Germans, practically, or German descent. And I have found nothing to indicate any strong feeling one way or another. Anything else? You had your hand up.
Yeah,
You really are being a pain.
I know. I have to keep up appearances.
Yes.
But there are, in a number of communities throughout the United States,
Yes.
minor riots and instances of where German restaurants overnight became Hungarian restaurants in order to pass. But I think certainly in Pennsylvania, one of the biggest effects is in the Lehigh Valley, which up to World War I had several German language newspapers, and they pretty much disappeared during World War I and never come back.
I would imagine the time between the sinking of the Lusitania and when we actually got into the war might have been a rough time for some German communities.
Absolutely.
But remember, at that point, the United States was not in the war.
That's right.
It
But
wasn't,
clearly,
but-
17 to 18 is a watershed as to ill feelings.
But I know out in Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa, in a lot of small German communities, after the Lusitania went down, those people took an awful lot of verbal and other abuse from their neighbors and friends. It's interesting, you know, everybody calls this the forgotten war. Not in our house. Not in our house.
And I've noticed that
It's a really interesting time period to study, not just the military stuff and the little arrows on maps and things like that, but it's fascinating to look at nationalism and transnationalism and gender roles and stuff like that. The things that war directly impacts. It's not just the battles. It's the behind the line stuff. And the world we live in today was created in Paris in 1919.
Yes, it was.
And absolutely created the maelstrom that we're in now. Well, thank you
Thank
again.
you.
Thank